Let's walk the talk.
702.
So on Listener's Choice, this came through, and on Listener's Choice, you'd know that we make it a priority to hear what is it that you would like to know about. And we received very interesting feedback from you that you are worried about the food prices because the cost of living in South Africa continues to bite. And one of the biggest pressure points for various households is food. Every month, millions of families are forced to make tough decisions about what goes into the shopping baskets as prices for basic goods seem to rise faster than incomes. And behind the numbers are real human stories where people cannot afford just a loaf of bread. Some don't even know how much that is. And we have human stories of hunger, nutrition gaps, and stretched budgets that are affecting families. Children go to school without having had breakfast, not out of choice or anything else, but because of affordability affecting their educational performance behind the desk. Various individuals cannot stretch the rent towards the end of the month. Wanted to know from you, please, honestly, and you can remain anonymous, how much do you spend on food every single month? A week? A day? How much do you spend? Let us know. Please send a voice note to 072-702-1702. But we've also invited the program coordinator at Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, Mervyn Abrahams, to give us some insights about this very unfashionable but critical discussion on food. Mervyn, thanks for your time. Welcome to 702. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Thabo, and good morning to all your listeners.
If you don't mind, Mervyn, just give us a sense of what the latest data is telling us about the cost of food in South Africa right now.
So, Thabo, the latest data, we publish a monthly index that contains a food basket of 44 very basic foods. Foods like maize meal and samp and onions and potatoes and a little bit of beef and tripe and brown bread and sugar and milk and eggs. So a very basic basket of food. And that basket of 44 foods in the month of August now stands at 5,380 Rand and 62 cents.
Goodness me.
Now, when we dig into the numbers, Thabo, there are conflicting pictures which we actually need to explore. So the one picture is that month on month, so when we look at August and July, then we see that the cost of that basket has come down by 62 Rand and 10 cents. So it's 62 Rand cheaper. But year on year, it is 153 Rand and 48 cents more expensive now in August than it was in August last year. Now, when we look at these figures, the impression is often created. Okay, so now food price inflation is stabilizing. Prices are beginning to come down, particularly with regard to fresh vegetables like potatoes and onions and tomatoes and spinach and carrots. That somehow households are actually able to afford the food. Now, there is a big difference between food prices and cost of living or affordability, as you said in the introduction to this discussion. And it's there that the real problem lies, Thabo. It's with cost of living and with affordability. So, for instance, if I might just continue.
Go ahead, Mervyn.
When we look, for instance, at the national minimum wage, now for the month of August, a national minimum wage would have brought something in the region of about 4,836 Rand. Now, already that wage is way below the cost of our basket of food.
Yeah.
Then you add on to that transport. We are told by a lot of communities around the major centers of South Africa that transport costs, on average, something like about 1,680 Rand.
Yeah.
And then when you look at electricity, because electricity is integral to food preparation and preservation. So without electricity, you'll be suffering.
You're stuck with raw food.
exactly. So now that would cost something like 1,180 rand, 81 rand, and that leaves about 1,974 rand from that wage. After you've paid those two expenses, that leaves 1,974 rand.
Yeah.
Now, there is no way the wage at the beginning couldn't afford the basket. And then when you pay those two things, then of course, you've only got about 2,000 at the most, 2,000 rand left.
Then you
so
can't
that's where
fulfill
the problem.
That.
Yeah.
Mervyn,
so that's where the problem comes.
Yeah, allow me to just jump in just quickly. I want to squeeze in as many questions as possible, especially around what a very important issue that you raised of a food basket. Let's look at those items, Mervyn. Which items have seen the steepest increases recently? Because I think those are very basic and those are the most common that many families can't do without.
So the prices of the food, the individual foods in the basket, they fluctuate. A lot is dependent on, for instance, seasonality. So now we are seeing that, for instance, a lot of fresh vegetables are coming down in price. But 6 months ago, that was driving the upward trend. It was potatoes and onions and carrots that was much more expensive. Now we're seeing the costs coming down of those because these excess are now entering into the market, and so that brings prices down. Where we have seen price increases in this month's basket has to do with particularly beef and particularly with regard to red meat. Red meat has become much more expensive now. And there is a particular reason for it, in the sense that we often run out during this time of the year. So then the price goes up. One really worrying trend for us is that the price of peanut butter, for instance, keep on increasing. It increases and increases and increases. Over the last month, it's increased by another 6%. Now, there is a reason why we're worried about peanut butter in particular, Thabo, because it is a very good protein for children. It is something that you can put on the children's bread, like going to school, and it is a solid, good, nutritious food. And when those things become much more expensive, then of course households then go for cheaper options. So they might go from peanut butter, they now go to, for instance, 2-minute noodles, which has no nutritional value actually for that child. It only fills the stomach, but it doesn't actually help with nutrition. So that's where it plays out.
Yeah, so the money in the pocket now competes with nutritional value. And that's something very important to look at. Are there any major differences that we have seen, Mervyn, regarding rural areas versus urban or peri-urban areas as far as food pricing is concerned? Because I'm just thinking as far as the scales of economies are concerned, you would be also speaking about transportation of food throughout the country. Are we seeing any disparities between the two as far as prices are concerned?
Yes, so we do see that. And it is, as you say, Thabo, largely driven by logistics and the cost of logistics. So we generally see, for instance, the basket in outlying areas like Springbok, where we track, are often much more expensive than, for instance, when you look at, say, the city of Cape Town. And that is largely driven by things like how far do we have to transport the food, how much petrol do we use, which is another area of big concern for us, Thabo, because in South Africa, we use the most expensive form of transport. The cheaper form of transport would, of course, be if Transnet organize themselves and get themselves organized. But, of course, we now have to use the road because Transnet is organized. So when you look, for instance, at a place like Springbok, then you see the cost of the basket is 5,763 rand, about 200 rand more than the average cost of the basket.
In the Northern Cape, right? Springbok in the Northern Cape.
in the Northern Cape. That is the far furthest area away from a major metropolitan city that we track, particularly to see the differences in this area. But it's a well-established fact that food in rural areas often costs more because the food leaves the rural areas to be processed, and then it has to come back to the rural area. And so it's all that logistics and petrol cost that needs to be included.
Mervyn, I just want to bring in some listeners who are intently listening to this discussion. I've asked them at the beginning of our discussions to throw in their worth and let us know what their experience is wherever they are on 072-702-1702.
Hi, Thabo. I would like to remain anonymous. Yes, food is very expensive. I think in a household of 4 people, and I'm talking husband, wife, and 2 boys. You know, boys eat a lot. I mean, they eat almost in 2 days, 2 loaves of bread are gone. So on average, food, I'll say 7,000 to 8,000 rand per month. But the elephant in the room, Thabo, that really needs some discussion. It's the cost of electricity. I mean, you spend 2,000 rand, you don't even get 450 units. It's ridiculous. Eskom and the government need to look into this issue of electricity. Electricity is just too expensive in this country. And I challenge government to really look at the issue of electricity. It's going to become unaffordable, the issue of electricity. I thank you.
With the prices of food, it's terrible, man. If you look at the sizes of the eggs, they are getting smaller. And then you look at the Nkomasi bottle, it is being reduced in size. Even the matches, sometimes you find a plain stick which you cannot use. Yeah, no, it's terrible.
Hi, good morning, Thabo. It's Monty from Phosphorus. To tell you the truth, the price of food is killing us. On my own, I spent plus minus 3,500 for the groceries. And after that, I buy meat for 3,000. Then there's a bread that you have to buy each and every day. A loaf of bread is 20 rand. So a week you spend 140 rand for bread. It's really killing us, my friend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Very interesting there, and I will allow my guest to jump in to give us his perspective. Mervyn Abrahams, Program Coordinator, Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. They have come up with some interesting numbers, and hence I asked you, how much are you spending? What are you taking out of your pocket and throwing it into the tills of various retailers for food for yourself and your family in a month, in a day, or in a week? And if you will, annually, how much are you spending? And the report found that the average cost of household food basket increased by 2.9%. It moved from just over 5,200 rands to 5,000 to almost 5,400 rands in August 2025, as opposed to the previous August. And they looked at 44 food items tracked in a basket, and 23 food increased in prices and 21 decreased in prices. It looks like we are having a difficult time. And you would know about the national minimum wage, right? That it's standing at about 4,800 rands or so for a work that would be 21 days invested. And if you are earning around about 5,000 rands, and this very interesting survey says the food, the annual, the basket, monthly basket is at about 5,000 rands, and you are earning less than 5,000 rands, it means that you are literally cutting corners to survive, and you are making ends meet in a very difficult way. And Mervyn, I want to ask you, having just ruminated upon those few digits that you have come up with, where are families making compromises mainly? Because it appears as if South African households cannot truly even afford the basic basket that you've put together.
Yes, Thabo. So that is really the most important question that you have just raised, and also just to say that the people that you had interviewed, they really raised really important questions. So what we have seen is that there are certain costs which, of course, households cannot do without. So if there is a worker in the family, that transport money gets set aside first. So transport is prioritized. The second thing that is being prioritized is electricity, because electricity not only allows you to cook your food and store your food and keep the food fresh, but it also provides security for people in our country. That means a lot. So of course, electricity is prioritized. And then debt servicing, because a lot of people have to take out debt just to survive, because they know that mid-month they will run out of money, and then they have to go and get debt again. So debt servicing then becomes critical, and only then, Thabo, only then do they start thinking, okay, now what food can we buy with the money that's left over? And that is why when there is not enough money left over, that is then impacts on how much food they can purchase. And so even if food prices like fresh vegetables does come down, from the outset you already don't have enough. So that's why it's an affordability, a cost of living issue. And so households are struggling to put food on the table because the other household essential services, they are just so expensive. So it's an interplay between all the different budget line items. It is like, for instance, what your listener said about electricity. So, for instance, in Pietermaritzburg, 350 kilowatts of electricity has increased by something like 138 rand. Since the new increases. Now you've got a food basket that might have gone down by 60 rand, but now you still have to pay that 138 rand. So you are still about 70 rand poorer than you were 2 months ago. And that's having its impact on households and household food security and nutrition security.
Here's a bit of a question. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but please maybe give a little bit of a limelight on it some more, Mervyn. It says, hi, Thabo, can you please ask your guest, do they know why the price of peanut butter has been shooting through the roof, as they've said, for the past 12 to 20 months? Is there a specific reason that we've picked up from the suppliers?
Thabo, whoever finds the answer to that question, please let me know. We have tried to do as much research, and we cannot come up with any rational reason. Now, having said that, it is also true that in South Africa, in terms of the food value chain, it is very difficult to get any information. So we know, for instance, what the farm gate price is, because Stat SA tell us what that is. Then we know what the price is in the supermarket, because we track those prices. But in between those two areas, there's the logistics, there's the manufacturing, there is all of those parts of the value chain that we just cannot get information from. Corporates would not give you that information. So we don't know whether the price increases on a product like peanut butter, but also other products, whether that is actually consistent with increased costs along the value chain, and whether that is fair or not. And therefore, we try not to give an answer to that question, because we just don't know, because there just isn't enough information for us to make a decision upon.
Or it could be supply and demand, the very basics of business. Perhaps more people are buying and business says, well, there is a demand, so we need to create more of the prices going higher because the demand is a little bit high. But we should try to find that out. And government has introduced, Mervyn, grants and subsidies, but are they keeping pace with this increment of prices as far as food is concerned. It's not much. I think we must start by saying that as a point of departure. It's not much. But is it trying to somehow alleviate that problem that exists, that disjuncture between what you are earning and the prices of food?
So, Thabo, any amount of money, of course, if you've got nothing, helps. So as you said, it's not much, but it does present a little bit of a help. But we also have to look at this from the broad picture of which is socio-economic development and economic development, So when we look, for instance, at a grant like the child support grant. Now, the child support grant is at 560. Our research shows that to feed a child a basic nutritious diet for a month will cost somewhere in the region of 943 Rand. So the child support grant is 41% below what it will cost a child. And it is also about 30% below the food poverty line of 796 Rand. Now, we know that the child support grant, a big portion of that goes towards food purchasing. The research after research after research has shown that. We know that it goes towards food and perhaps a bit of electricity. So when this grant is set so low that it's only subsistence level, you can just survive, then it actually makes it very difficult for households to be able to feed their children enough. Now, Thabo, that has major consequences for South Africa's development and economic productivity trajectory. Let me just explain. So if a child doesn't eat nutritious food, and already we know, then that child ends up being stunted, which is a cognitive, it's a brain disorder. And we know that already 25% of all our children are stunted. Now, that has direct implications for educational outcomes, okay? So already 25% of our children are condemned from getting good educational grades, even before they start school. Then you go up into the ladder. Those children will be more susceptible to disease, so they will have to use the clinics more, etc. Research has shown that a stunted child, when they reach the age of working life, so around 22, 23, and they enter into the labor force, then they are most likely to enter the labor force as a laborer, lowest paid, which means that intergenerational cycle of poverty continue. He was too poor to eat properly. He now earns too little to feed his child properly, and that's the intergenerational poverty.
Vicious cycle. We have to leave it at that, Mervyn, unfortunately. But thank you so much for your insights. We must make time to delve on these critical issues again in the near future. Really appreciate your time. Mervyn Abrahams, who is Program Coordinator at the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. 11:30.